The mining colony on Kepler 442b was dying. Commander Zara Kethvel knew this as she stood looking out the main window of the colony's control center. Her blue skin showed the stress lines that had grown deeper over the past 6 months. The enemy, ships moved in slow circles around their small world like hungry wolves waiting for their prey to weaken. The Vorthak had come without warning. These insect-like creatures traveled in massive fleets, destroying everything they found. They took no prisoners. They left nothing alive. World after world had fallen to their attacks, and now it was the colony's turn to face extinction. Zara had been a military officer for 20 years before taking this assignment. She thought protecting a small research colony would be peaceful work. She was wrong. Now she commanded the defense of 300 civilians who looked to her for salvation she could not provide. The colony housed beings from 12 different worlds. There were Altarians like herself with blue-scaled skin and large dark eyes. Zalithians with their long, thin bodies and multiple arms worked in the research labs. Corvin traders with their thick gray skin and tusks managed the supply warehouses. Even some Threnodi scholars lived here, their pale, translucent bodies making them look like living ghosts as they studied ancient texts in the library. But it was the children that broke Zara's heart. Young ones from all these species played in the corridors, laughing and running games. They did not understand that death circled above them. Their parents tried to keep them happy while quietly preparing for the worst. Dr. Plex Norvani approached Zara at the observation window. His species had tentacles instead of arms, and they moved nervously as he spoke. "Commander, the enemy is moving again. Our sensors show they are preparing for another attack." Zara nodded without looking away from the window. The Vorthak battlecruiser hung in space like a dark metal moon. Smaller ships moved around it in formation. She had counted the enemy vessels so many times she knew them by heart. 17 ships total. The colony had 2 small patrol craft that were older than most of the people they were supposed to protect. "How long until our shields fail completely?" Zara asked. Dr. Norvani's tentacles drooped. "At the current rate of drain, perhaps 6 hours. Maybe less if they hit us with everything they have." 6 hours. Zara closed her eyes and tried not to think about what would happen when the shields fell. The Vorthak did not kill quickly. They preferred to make examples that would terrify other worlds into surrendering without a fight. "Commander," called Lieutenant Vex from the communications station. His Corvin voice was deep and rough like gravel. "Still no response from the Federation fleet. Our last message said they are 3 weeks away." 3 weeks. They might as well have said 3 years. The colony would be nothing but ash and memories long before help arrived. Zara walked to the central command table where a holographic display showed their situation. Red dots marked enemy positions. A flickering blue circle showed their failing defensive shields. Green dots marked the civilian shelters where families huddled together waiting for the end. "Ma'am," Dr. Norvani said quietly, "perhaps it is time to discuss evacuation procedures." Zara knew what he meant. The colony had emergency escape pods, but not enough for everyone. They would have to choose who lived and who stayed behind to die. How do you make such a choice? How do you look into a child's eyes and tell them there is no room for their parents on the escape ship? "The pods can carry maybe 50 people," Zara said. 50 out of 300. "The children must go first," Dr. Norvani said. "And the research data. Some of our work here could benefit the entire galaxy if it survives." Zara wanted to scream. She wanted to grab a weapon and charge the enemy ships herself. She wanted to do anything except stand here making lists of who deserved to live. But she was the commander. These people depended on her to make the impossible decisions. "Prepare the evacuation list," she said finally. "Children first, then essential research personnel." As Dr. Norvani hurried away to begin the terrible task, Zara returned to the window. The Vorthak ships had moved closer. She could see the details of their black hulls now, covered in spikes and weapon ports like some nightmare vision of a warship. These creatures loved violence. They decorated their ships to look as frightening as possible. Young Kira, a Zalithian child of maybe 8 years old, came running into the command center. Her 4 arms moved in the graceful way of her people as she approached Zara. Commander, my father wants to know if the bad ships will go away soon. Zara knelt down to look into the child's large purple eyes. Kira's father worked in the mining operation deep below the surface. He was probably preparing the heavy equipment to use as a last line of defense when the Vorthak landed their troops. We are doing everything we can to keep you safe, Zara said. It was not a lie, but it was not the whole truth either. Kira smiled and hugged Zara with two of her arms before running back to find her friends. Such trust, such innocent faith that the adults would protect them. Zara felt that trust like a weight on her shoulders. Lieutenant Vex called out from his station. Commander, the enemy flagship is powering up its main weapons. They are targeting our shield generators. This was it. The final assault was beginning. Zara looked around the command center at her small staff. These brave beings had stayed at their posts even though they knew they were about to die. Not one of them had asked to be put on the evacuation list. All personnel to battle stations, Zara announced over the colony's communication system. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to battle stations. The command center filled with controlled chaos as everyone moved to their emergency positions. Dr. Norvani returned from the lower levels where the escape pods waited. His expression told Zara everything she needed to know about how that conversation had gone. The list is complete, he said quietly. But Commander, many of the parents refused to leave without their children. And most of the children refused to leave without their parents. Of course they did. Zara should have expected this. These people were not cowards. They were researchers and miners and teachers who had built a life together on this distant world. They would face death together rather than abandon each other. Then we make our stand here, Zara said. All of us together. The first energy blast from the Vorthak flagship hit their shields like a hammer blow. The lights flickered and the floor shook. Everyone grabbed onto something solid as the colony's structure groaned under the impact. Shields down to 60%, reported the engineering officer. Another blast hit them. Then another. The Vorthak were not in a hurry. They would slowly break down the defenses and then land their troops to finish the job personally. It was their way. Zara activated the colony's external cameras and displayed the images on the main screen. The Vorthak battlecruiser looked like a black metal mountain hanging in space above them. Smaller ships moved in formation around it, their weapons glowing with charging energy. Ma'am, Lieutenant Vex said from his communications post. I am receiving a strange signal. Very faint, it is not from the Federation. What kind of signal? Unknown, Commander. The computer cannot identify the source, but it is definitely artificial. Someone is out there. Zara felt a tiny spark of hope, but she pushed it down. Hope was dangerous now. Hope made people do stupid things when they should be preparing for death with dignity. The shields took another, massive hit. 50% power remaining. Soon the Vorthak would break through and the real horror would begin, but at least they would face it together, as a community, as a family forged by shared danger and mutual care. Outside the window, the enemy ships continued their slow dance of death, patient and confident in their overwhelming power. They had destroyed so many worlds. What was one more small colony to them? But in the depths of space, something was coming. Something the Vorthak had never faced before. Something that would change everything. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant and watched the stars. His ship was one of the newest in Earth's small fleet. The Defiant was not the biggest warship in space. It was not the most powerful. But it was fast, and it was tough, and most importantly, it was crewed by humans who would not give up when things got hard. Jake was 38 years old and had been in space for half his life. He had started as a simple pilot flying cargo ships between Earth and the Moon. Then came the first contact with alien species 15 years ago. Everything changed after that. Humanity learned they were not alone in the universe. They also learned that space was a dangerous place full of creatures that saw humans as weak and primitive. The bridge crew worked quietly around him. Executive Officer Lisa Hayes checked the navigation systems at her station. She was a small woman with dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Jake trusted her completely. They had served together for 5 years and she had never let him down. Communications Officer Ben Carter sat at his station monitoring radio signals from across the galaxy. He was young, maybe 25, but he had the best ears in the fleet for picking up faint transmissions. His equipment could hear whispers from halfway across the galaxy if he tuned it right. The Defiant was on routine patrol in a quiet sector of space. Nothing ever happened out here. Most alien species considered this area to be empty and worthless. That was fine with Jake. He preferred boring patrols to shooting wars. "Captain," Carter called out suddenly. His voice sounded different. Worried. "I am picking up something on the emergency frequencies. It is very weak, but I think it is a distress call." Jake walked over to Carter's station. The young officer was adjusting his equipment, trying to clean up the signal. Static filled the speakers with occasional words breaking through in different alien languages. "Where is it coming from?" Jake asked. Carter pointed at his screen. "The Kepler 442 system, sir. About 8 light years from here. The signal is very old, maybe 6 days. It has been bouncing around space trying to find someone to hear it." Jake knew about Kepler 442b. It was a small research colony run by different alien species working together. The kind of place where scientists studied rocks and plants while their children played in safe corridors. It was not the kind of place that should be sending emergency signals. "What does the message say?" Jake asked. Carter worked for several minutes cleaning up the static. Finally, he played the transmission through the bridge speakers. The voice was female, speaking in the common galactic language that most species used for trade and diplomacy. "This is Commander Zara Kethvel of Kepler 442b colony. We are under attack by Vorthak forces. 17 enemy ships. Our defenses are failing. 300 civilians, including children, need immediate assistance. Any ship receiving this message, please respond. We cannot hold much longer." The bridge went silent. Everyone knew about the Vorthak. They were one of the most feared species in this part of the galaxy. They traveled in large fleets, destroying everything they found. No one had ever successfully fought them and won. Most military forces ran away when Vorthak ships appeared on their sensors. "Sir," Hayes said quietly, "that colony is outside our patrol area, and if the Vorthak are really there—" She did not finish the sentence. Everyone knew what she meant. Fighting the Vorthak was considered suicide. Jake stared at the star chart on the main screen. Kepler 442 was just a small dot of light, but there were 300 people there, men, women, and children from different worlds who had come together to build something peaceful. Now they were going to die because no one would help them. "Carter, when was this message sent?" Jake asked. 6 days ago, sir. If they were under attack then, they might already be—" Carter stopped talking. 6 days, Jake repeated. The colony might already be destroyed. Everyone might already be dead. But they might not be. Maybe some people were still fighting. Maybe some children were still hiding in shelters waiting for someone to save them. Chief Tactical Officer Rick Torres looked up from his weapons console. He was an older man with gray hair and scars from battles in Earth's early days in space. "Captain, our intelligence files say the Vorthak usually take several weeks to completely destroy a target. They like to make it slow and painful. Several weeks, that meant there might still be time." "Hayes, how long to reach Kepler 442 at maximum speed?" Jake asked. 6 days, sir. But Captain, we should contact Fleet Command first, get authorization. Maybe request backup. Jake understood her concern. The smart thing would be to call Earth and ask for orders. Wait for other ships to join them. Follow proper military procedure. But 6 days to get there, plus time to send messages back to Earth and wait for replies, plus time for other ships to reach them. The colony would be dead long before any rescue fleet arrived. Torres, what do we know about Vorthak tactics? Jake asked. The tactical officer called up files on his screen. They use overwhelming force, sir. Heavy ships with powerful shields and weapons. They prefer to destroy enemies from long range rather than fight up close. Most species surrender when they see how outnumbered they are. What about their weaknesses? Torres was quiet for a moment. Honestly, sir, no one has found any. Every battle against the Vorthak has ended the same way. Total defeat for whoever fought them. Jake walked to the center of the bridge and looked around at his crew. 43 men and women who had volunteered for deep space service. They knew the dangers when they signed up. They knew they might face situations exactly like this one. Carter, send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we received a distress call and are responding. Include all the details about the Vorthak presence. Yes, sir. Should I wait for a reply before we change course? No. Helm, set course for Kepler 442b. Maximum burn. I want to be there in 5 days instead of 6. The helm officer's hands moved over his controls. Course laid in, sir. Ready for hyperspace jump. Hayes stepped closer to Jake. Captain, with respect, this could be a trap. The Vorthak might be using the colony as bait to draw in rescue ships. Jake had thought of that possibility. It was exactly the kind of thing a smart enemy might do, but it did not change anything. If it was a trap, they would deal with it. If it was not a trap, then 300 innocent people needed help that only the Defiant could provide. Maybe it is a trap, Jake said. But what if it is not? What if there are children hiding in shelters right now, listening to explosions getting closer, wondering why no one is coming to help them? He looked around the bridge again. These people had families back on Earth, parents and spouses and children of their own. They had every reason to choose the safe path, but Jake could see in their faces that they understood. Sometimes you had to risk everything to do what was right. Torres, start working on tactical plans. I want to know everything about Vorthak, ships and weapons. Hayes, get me damage control teams ready. If we are going into a fight, I want every system working perfectly. Carter, keep monitoring that emergency frequency. If the colony is still alive, they might send more messages. The young communications officer nodded and turned back to his equipment. A few minutes later, he looked up with excitement. Captain, I'm getting another transmission. Very faint, but it is definitely from the colony. Put it through the speakers. The static-filled voice of Commander Zara came through the bridge speakers. She sounded tired and scared, but still determined. Any ship receiving this message we are still holding, but our shields are failing. The enemy is preparing for final assault. If anyone is coming, please hurry. Jake felt something tight in his chest. That voice belonged to someone who was trying to protect 300 innocent people with no hope of success. Someone who kept fighting even when defeat was certain. Someone who reminded him why humans had earned respect among the alien species despite being newcomers to the galaxy. All hands, this is the captain, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. We have received a distress call from a civilian colony under attack. We are the only ship close enough to help. I will not lie to you about the danger. We are going to face an enemy that has never been defeated. The odds are not in our favor. He paused to let that sink in. Every person on the ship was listening. Every person was making their own choice about what came next. But here is what I believe. I believe that when innocent people are in danger, someone has to stand up. I believe that when children are crying for help, someone has to answer. I believe that humanity did not come this far in the universe just to run away when things get difficult. The hyperspace engines engaged with a deep rumble that shook the entire ship. Stars became lines of light as the Defiant jumped to faster-than-light speed. We are going to show the galaxy something they have never seen before, Jake continued. We are going to show them what happens when humans decide that something is worth fighting for. In hyperspace, the Defiant raced toward a battle that everyone said was impossible to win. But the crew was not thinking about losing. They were thinking about 300 people who needed help. They were thinking about children who deserved to grow up safe. They were thinking about doing what was right, no matter what it cost. Behind them, Earth was just a small blue dot in the vast darkness of space. Ahead of them waited an enemy that had conquered dozens of worlds. 5 days later, the UES Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. What Captain Jake Morrison saw on his main screen made his blood run cold. The tactical display lit up with so many red enemy contacts that it looked like a swarm of angry bees. "Sweet Mother of God," whispered Ensign Amy Rodriguez from her sensor station. Her young face had gone pale as she counted the enemy ships. Captain, I am reading 17 Vorthak vessels, 2 massive battle cruisers, 8 heavy frigates, and 7 destroyers. This is not just a raiding party, this is a full invasion fleet. Jake stared at the display in silence. He had expected to find a few enemy ships attacking the colony. Instead, he found an armada that could destroy most planets. The 2 battle cruisers alone were each 3 times the size of his ship. Their black hulls were covered in weapon ports and armor plating that looked thick enough to stop anything the Defiant could throw at them. Status of the colony? Jake asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Rodriguez worked at her controls for several long minutes. Sir, I am detecting life signs on the surface. The colony is still there. Their shields are very weak but still holding. Barely. Still alive. Jake felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. They had made it in time. Not too late. The colonists were still fighting, still waiting for help that they probably thought would never come. Communications, any signals from the surface? Ben Carter adjusted his equipment and shook his head. Nothing, sir. The Vorthak are jamming all frequencies, but sensors show people are definitely still alive down there. Executive Officer Lisa. Hayes moved to stand beside Jake's command chair. Her voice was quiet, so only he could hear. Captain, this is worse than our worst-case scenario. Those battle cruisers have enough firepower to level continents. If we engage them directly, they will vaporize us in minutes. Jake knew she was right. Every tactical manual said that a single ship should never engage a fleet this size. It was not just suicide, it was pointless suicide. The Defiant would be destroyed without even scratching the enemy's paint. But on the view screen, he could see Vorthak fighters making attack runs on the colony's failing shields. Explosions bloomed across the settlement's protective barriers like deadly flowers. People were dying down there while he stood on his bridge calculating odds. Torres, tactical analysis, Jake ordered. Chief Tactical Officer Rick Torres pulled up detailed scans of the enemy fleet. His expression was grim as he studied the data. Sir, we are looking at the equivalent of half the Earth defense fleet. 2 Ket-class battlecruisers, each one mounting heavy plasma cannons and torpedo launchers. The frigates and destroyers are supporting vessels, but any one of them outguns us. What about our advantages? Torres was quiet for a moment, thinking. We are faster and more maneuverable. Human ship design emphasizes speed over heavy armor. We can probably outrun them if we need to retreat. I am not asking about retreating, Jake said firmly. I am asking how we fight them. Torres looked surprised, then thoughtful. Well, sir, we do have those experimental plasma torpedoes, 12 of them, still in testing phase, but if they work as designed, they pack more punch than anything their size. And our railgun batteries use tungsten penetrators that can punch through most armor at close range. Range limitations? The plasma torpedoes are effective up to 50,000 kilometers. Railguns work best under 20,000. But sir, to get that close to those battle cruisers, we would have to fly through their entire defensive grid, Jake finished. I understand. On the tactical display, the Vorthak fleet moved in perfect formation around the planet. They had been attacking the colony for days, slowly wearing down its defenses. They were in no hurry. They knew no help was coming. Jake studied the enemy positions, looking for weaknesses. The battle cruisers hung in high orbit, using their long-range weapons to pound the colony's shields. The smaller ships formed a protective screen around them. It was a textbook formation designed to destroy any rescue attempt. Captain, Rodriguez called out. The colony's shields just took another massive hit. They are down to 15% power, maybe less. Jake made his decision. All hands, this is the captain. General quarters, battle stations, this is not a drill. Alarms sounded throughout the ship as the crew rushed to their combat positions. Damage control teams sealed blast doors and emergency bulkheads. Engineering increased power to weapons and shields. In the Marine barracks, soldiers checked their equipment and said prayers to whatever gods they believed in. Torres, load all torpedo tubes. Railgun batteries to full charge. I want every weapon we have ready to fire. Aye, sir. Weapons hot and ready. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These men and women had families back on Earth. They had signed up to explore space and defend humanity, not to die in a hopeless battle against impossible odds, but not one of them looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Hayes, take us in. Full military power, direct course for the nearest battlecruiser. The Defiant's engines roared to life, pushing the ship toward the inner system at maximum acceleration. On the sensors, Jake watched the Vorthak fleet react to their approach. Fighter squadrons began launching from the larger ships. Weapon systems powered up and swiveled to track the incoming human vessel. "Sir," Carter said from his communication station, "I am picking up Vorthak battle chatter. They seem surprised that we are here. One ship against their entire fleet." "What are they saying?" Roughly translated, they are asking each other if we are insane or just stupid. Jake smiled grimly. "Tell them they are about to find out. Torres, target the lead battlecruiser's shield generators. Fire when ready." The first 6 plasma torpedoes streaked away from the Defiant like miniature suns. They had been designed by Earth's best scientists using technology borrowed from a dozen alien species. Nobody knew for sure if they would work in real combat conditions. They worked better than anyone had hoped. The experimental weapons punched through the Vorthak shields like they were made of paper. Brilliant explosions blossomed along the battle. Cruiser's hull as the plasma cores detonated. Secondary explosions followed as the ship's own systems overloaded. "Direct hits!" Torres shouted with excitement. "Their forward shields are down. Hull breaches on multiple decks." But the Vorthak response was swift and overwhelming. Both battlecruisers turned toward the human ship, their massive weapon arrays swiveling to target this unexpected threat that had just hurt them. Energy beams lanced through space, some missing the fast-moving Defiant by mere meters. "Evasive maneuvers," Jake ordered. "Keep us moving." The Defiant danced through space with an agility that seemed to confuse the Vorthak gunners. Human ships were built to twist and roll and change direction quickly. It was a fighting style developed during centuries of warfare on Earth, where mobility often mattered more than heavy armor. Fighter squadrons swarmed toward them like angry hornets. The Defiant's point defense systems came alive, railgun turrets tracking and firing in precise bursts. Vorthak fighters exploded into clouds of debris and superheated gas, but more kept coming. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Rodriguez reported as enemy fire found its mark. Emergency teams responding. The ship shuddered under the impact of heavy weapons fire. Sparks flew from damaged control panels. The lights flickered as power systems strained to keep up with demand. On the surface of Kepler 442b, Commander Zara stood in her damaged command center and watched the impossible sight on her screens. A single human ship was fighting the entire Vorthak fleet. She had never seen anything like it. The human vessel moved like a living thing, rolling and weaving through enemy fire while maintaining a steady attack on the much larger Vorthak ships. "Commander," Dr. Norvani said in amazement, "their attack has drawn off most of the fighters that were bombing us. Our shields are stabilizing." It was true. The Vorthak had stopped their assault on the colony to deal with this new threat. For the first time in days, the bombardment had stopped. Children peeked out of shelters. Parents dared to hope that maybe, somehow, they might survive. Back in space, Jake gripped his command chair as another enemy salvo barely missed them. "Torres, how many torpedoes left?" 6, sir. Target the lead battlecruiser's reactor core. If we can cause a containment failure... Sir, at this range, if their reactor goes critical, the explosion will destroy everything within 100,000 kilometers, including us. Jake looked at the tactical display. The damaged battlecruiser was trying to retreat behind the protective screen of smaller ships. If they let it escape, it would repair its shields and return to bombard the colony. The colonists would die, and the Defiant's sacrifice would mean nothing. "Sometimes you have to risk everything to save what matters," Jake said quietly. "Fire all remaining torpedoes." 6 plasma torpedoes streaked across space toward the wounded battlecruiser. Vorthak point defense systems tried desperately to intercept them. 4 torpedoes were destroyed by defensive fire, but 2 got through. They struck the battlecruiser's reactor core dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive ship began to glow from within as its fusion reactor lost containment. The glow grew brighter and brighter until it was too brilliant to look at directly. The response from the colony came through crackling static, but Commander Zara's voice was clear and filled with emotion that she could not hide. Captain Morrison, this is Commander Zara Kethvel. We thought no one was coming. We thought we were all going to die. How is this possible? One ship against the entire Vorthak fleet? Captain Jake Morrison smiled despite the pain in his ribs from where he had been thrown against his command chair during the battle. Around him, his bridge crew worked to assess damage and track the retreating enemy ships. Smoke still drifted from burned control panels, and several stations showed red warning lights. Commander, we received your distress call 6 days ago. We came as fast as we could. What is your current status? Shields are holding at 30% power. We have wounded but no deaths. Captain, what you did was impossible. Our tactical computers said you had 0 chance of survival against those odds. Jake looked at the tactical display where red dots marked the remaining Vorthak ships pulling back to the edge of the system. They had not left completely. They were regrouping, probably calling for reinforcements. This fight was not over. Sometimes, impossible just takes a little longer, Commander. We need to talk about your defense situation. The Vorthak will be back. Executive Officer Lisa Hayes approached Jake's chair with a damage report. Her uniform was torn and she had a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were alert and focused. Captain, we took heavy damage during that engagement. Hull breaches on 3 decks, main power down to 60%, and we used all our plasma torpedoes. If they come back, how long for repairs? Jake asked. Critical systems, maybe 6 hours. Full repairs would take weeks at a proper shipyard. Jake nodded and turned back to the communication with the colony. Commander Zara, we need to discuss evacuation procedures. My ship can take maybe 50 people. Do you have other transport? There was a long pause before Zara responded. Captain, we talked about evacuation before you arrived. Most of the families refused to split up. The children will not leave their parents, and the parents will not abandon their children. If some of us leave, we all leave. If some of us stay, we all stay. Jake understood. These people had built a community together. They would not abandon each other when things got dangerous. It was exactly what humans would do in the same situation. It was also what made evacuation impossible with just 1 ship. How many ships do you have on the surface? 2 cargo transports and 1 research vessel. They are not armed and barely capable of interplanetary flight. They would never survive a trip to the nearest Federation base. Jake studied the star charts on his main display. The nearest Federation military base was 12 light-years away. The nearest human outpost was 15 light-years in the opposite direction. Either trip would take weeks for slow civilian ships, and the Vorthak would catch them long before they reached safety. Chief Tactical Officer Rick Torres looked up from his weapons console. Captain, I am tracking the retreating Vorthak ships. They have stopped at the edge of the system and are holding position. My guess is they are calling for backup. How long before reinforcements arrive? Depends on how far away their nearest fleet is. Could be days, could be weeks. But they will be back, probably with enough ships to make sure we cannot stop them again. Jake felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. His ship was damaged, his crew was tired, and he was responsible for protecting 300 civilians who had nowhere to run. The smart military decision would be to evacuate as many people as possible and retreat to fight another day. But that would mean abandoning most of the colonists to certain death. Carter, send a message to Earth Fleet Command, full tactical report. Tell them we need immediate reinforcements at Kepler 442b, maximum priority. Communications Officer Ben. Carter nodded and began preparing the transmission. Sir, at this distance it will take 4 days for the message to reach Earth. Even if they send ships immediately, we are looking at least 2 weeks before help arrives. 2 weeks. Jake doubted they had that much time. The Vorthak would probably return with overwhelming force long before Earth could respond. He needed a different solution. Torres, what is the status of our manufacturing capability? The tactical officer looked surprised by the question. Sir, we have standard fabrication units for repairs and spare parts. Nothing fancy, but we can make most basic components if we have raw materials. What about weapons? Could we manufacture more torpedoes? Not the plasma torpedoes, sir. Those require specialized components we do not have. But we could make basic kinetic warheads, maybe some mines. Why do you ask? Jake was thinking about the asteroid belt in the outer system. Lots of raw materials, floating around out there. The Defiant had mining equipment for emergency repairs. If they could set up a temporary base on one of the larger asteroids. Commander Zara, Jake said into the communicator, what kind of manufacturing facilities does your colony have? We have a full industrial complex for processing ore and manufacturing equipment. We can make almost anything if we have the proper materials and time. Captain, what are you thinking? I am thinking that if the Vorthak want to fight, we should give them one they will never forget. But first we need to get your people to safety. Jake turned to address his bridge crew. Here is what we are going to do. We cannot evacuate everyone, and we cannot outrun the Vorthak fleet that is coming. So we are going to make a stand right here, but not on the planet's surface where civilians could get hurt. He pointed at the tactical display showing the asteroid belt. There, in the outer system, we set up a defensive position using the asteroids for cover and raw materials. The colony gets evacuated to a hidden base deep in the belt where the Vorthak cannot find them. Hayes frowned as she studied the display. Captain, that could work for hiding civilians, but defending an asteroid base against a full Vorthak fleet? We would need dozens of ships and massive defensive installations. Then we better start building them. Commander Zara, how long would it take to evacuate your people to the asteroid belt? With our 3 ships plus your shuttlecraft, maybe. 12 hours to move everyone. But Captain, you are talking about building a military base from scratch. That would take months. We do not have months, Jake said. We have days, maybe a week. It will have to be enough. Over the next 18 hours, the most unusual evacuation in galactic history began. The Defiant used its powerful engines to move large asteroids into defensive positions around a particularly large rock that would serve as the main base. Colony ships ferried civilians and equipment from the planet's surface to the hidden asteroid facility. Dr. Plex Norvani supervised the installation of the colony's manufacturing equipment in tunnels carved deep inside the asteroid. His tentacles moved efficiently as he directed teams of workers setting up metal refineries and fabrication units. Captain Morrison, the scientist said as Jake inspected the work, this is incredible. In less than a day, you have moved our entire colony and begun building fortifications that would normally take months to construct. Jake watched human and alien workers laboring side by side, cutting tunnels and installing equipment with desperate efficiency. Children helped carry tools while their parents assembled defensive systems. Everyone understood that their survival depended on finishing this work before the Vorthak returned. Doctor, necessity is a powerful motivator. When people are fighting for their lives, they can accomplish amazing things. Young Kira, the Zilithian child who had spoken to Commander Zara days earlier, approached Jake with 2 of her 4 arms, carrying a metal plate. Captain Morrison, my father made this for your ship. He says it will help protect you when the bad ships come back. Jake knelt down to examine the gift. It was a piece of advanced armor plating made from materials the colony had been researching. Lighter than steel but stronger than titanium, designed to deflect energy weapons. Tell your father thank you, Kira. We will put this to good use. The child smiled and ran back to find her parents, who were working to install defensive weapons in the asteroid's surface. Everyone was contributing something to their survival. Torres appeared at Jake's side with a progress report. Captain, we have completed the first phase of construction. Basic life support throughout the tunnel complex, 3 defensive weapon emplacements, and a command center. The manufacturing units are online and producing kinetic torpedoes and armor plating. How many torpedoes? 50 so far, with more coming off the production line every hour. They are not as powerful as our plasma weapons, but they will punch holes in Vorthak ships if we can get close enough. Jake looked at the tactical display showing their hidden base. It was not much compared to a real military installation, but it was something. More importantly, it was defendable. The asteroids provided natural cover, and the Vorthak would have to search hundreds of rocks to find the main base. Status of the civilian evacuation? Complete, sir. All 300 colonists are safely aboard the asteroid base. The colony, on the planet's surface, has been abandoned. Jake felt a moment of satisfaction. Whatever happened next, the civilians were as safe as he could make them. Hidden deep in the asteroid belt with supplies and manufacturing capability, they could survive. For months, even if the worst happened. The Vorthak fleet approached the Kepler 442 system like a storm of death. 12 ships moved in perfect formation, their black hulls bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. Fleet Commander Krex Thule stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical displays with growing anger. His species had conquered 47 worlds without a single defeat. The Vorthak were masters of space warfare. They had technology that most species could only dream of possessing. Yet somehow a single primitive human ship had destroyed one of their battlecruisers and forced them to retreat like cowards. Status of the planet? Krex Thule demanded from his tactical officer. No signs of life, Commander. The colony appears to be abandoned. Our sensors detect no shield emissions or defensive installations. Krex Thule's compound eyes glittered with suspicion. Scan the entire system. The humans must be hiding somewhere. They would not abandon 300 civilians without a fight. Miles away in the asteroid belt, Captain Jake Morrison watched the enemy fleet on his tactical display. The Vorthak were being careful this time, sending scout ships to investigate every large object in the system. It would take them hours to search all the asteroids, but eventually they would find the hidden base. Torres, are the defensive systems ready? Jake asked. Chief Tactical Officer Rick Torres nodded grimly. All weapon platforms are online and loaded with kinetic torpedoes. The mining charges are in position throughout the asteroid field. Not enough to stop that fleet, but we can make them pay for every meter they advance. The past week had been a miracle of engineering. Working together, humans and aliens had carved a fortress out of solid rock. Weapons emplacements hidden in asteroid tunnels. Manufacturing facilities producing ammunition around the clock. Living quarters deep underground where 300 civilians waited and hoped. Commander Zara approached Jake in the command center they had built inside the largest asteroid. Her blue-scaled face showed determination mixed with fear. Captain, my people want to fight alongside yours. We have mining equipment that can be used as weapons. Cutting lasers, explosive charges, heavy machinery. Jake shook his head. Your job is to keep the civilians safe. If something happens to my crew, you need to be ready to take command of the defense. And if something happens to all of us, Jake looked at the tactical display where red dots marked the approaching enemy fleet. Then you hide until help arrives from Earth. The message we sent will bring a rescue fleet eventually. Dr. Plex Norvani hurried into the command center, his tentacles carrying a metal cylinder. Captain, we have finished the special project you requested. 100 gravity mines, programmed to activate when Vorthak ships pass within range. Gravity mines were illegal weapons banned by most galactic treaties. They created artificial gravity fields strong enough to crush starships or tear them apart. Jake had not wanted to use such terrible weapons, but the Vorthak had left him no choice. Deploy them along the most likely approach routes, Jake ordered. But make sure our people know where they are. I do not want any accidents. On his flagship, Krex Thule received reports from his scout ships as they searched the outer system. Empty asteroid after empty asteroid. No signs of the human ship or the missing colonists. His anger grew with each negative report. Commander, his sensor officer called out, I am detecting metal deposits in several asteroids that do not match natural formations. Refined materials, possibly artificial structures. Finally, Krex Thule studied the data with satisfaction. The humans thought they were clever, hiding among the rocks like insects. They would learn that the Vorthak could dig them out of any hiding place. Fleet Formation Delta. We will blast every suspicious asteroid until we find them. The Vorthak. Ships spread out and began moving deeper into the asteroid belt. Their powerful sensors probed each rock looking for signs of artificial construction or hidden ships. They found the first gravity mine completely by accident. The Vorthak destroyer Sek Moth was investigating a cluster of small asteroids when its hull passed within activation range of the hidden weapon. The artificial gravity field engaged instantly, creating forces that no ship could withstand. Jake watched on his tactical display as the enemy destroyer was crushed like an empty can. The ship's hull buckled and collapsed, spilling atmosphere and debris into space. There were no survivors. "First blood to us," Torres observed with grim satisfaction. But the Vorthak quickly adapted to the new threat. They began using long-range weapons to destroy asteroids from a safe distance, working their way systematically through the belt. It would take longer, but it would keep their ships away from any more hidden mines. "They are learning," Jake said. "Time for Phase 3. Throughout the asteroid belt, hidden weapon platforms came online. Kinetic torpedoes launched from concealed positions targeting the Vorthak ships from multiple directions. The enemy had expected to find a hidden base, not an entire defensive network spread across hundreds of kilometers. The second Vorthak destroyer took 6 torpedo hits before its crew realized they were under attack. Emergency alarms sounded throughout the alien fleet as explosions blossomed against their hulls. The humans had turned the entire asteroid belt into a fortress. "Return fire on all targets," Krex Thule commanded. "Destroy everything larger than a shuttle." The space battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Vorthak ships fired massive energy beams that shattered asteroids into glowing fragments. Human weapons platforms responded with volleys of kinetic torpedoes that punched through alien armor. Mining charges detonated in coordinated sequences, creating fields of deadly debris. But the Vorthak had superior firepower and more ships. One by one, the human weapon platforms were destroyed by concentrated enemy fire. The defensive network that had taken a week to build was being systematically eliminated. "Sir," Torres reported, "we have lost 6 weapon platforms. The outer defense line is collapsing." Jake watched the tactical display as red enemy contacts pushed deeper into the asteroid belt. Soon they would reach the main base where 300 civilians waited in underground shelters. All remaining platforms, focus fire on the lead battlecruiser. "Everything we have." 20 kinetic torpedoes launched simultaneously from the surviving weapon platforms. Most were intercepted by Vorthak point defenses, but 3 found their target. The explosion sent shockwaves through the enemy flagship, but its heavy armor absorbed most of the damage. "Minimal effect," Torres reported. "That ship is too well armored for our weapons." Jake made a decision that would have horrified any sane military commander. "Prepare the Defiant for ramming speed." Executive Officer Lisa Hayes turned to stare at him. "Captain, you cannot be serious. We would never survive a collision with that battlecruiser." "The ship would not survive," Jake agreed. "But the civilians might. If we can take out their flagship, the rest of the fleet might retreat again." Before Hayes could argue further, Communications Officer Ben Carter called out from his station. "Captain, I am receiving a transmission. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system." New contacts appeared on the tactical display, but these were not red enemy dots. They were blue, marking friendly ships. Jake counted them with growing amazement. 15 human vessels, including 2 heavy cruisers and a carrier loaded with fighters. "This is Admiral Sarah Thompson aboard the UES Thunderbolt," came a familiar voice over the communication system. "Sorry we are late to the party, Captain. Morrison. We came as soon as we received your message." Jake felt relief wash over him like a wave. Admiral Thompson had been his instructor at the Naval Academy 15 years ago. If anyone could handle the Vorthak fleet, it was her. "Admiral, we have civilians in the asteroid belt and enemy ships throughout the area. Recommend caution." "Understood, Captain. All ships. This is Admiral Thompson. We have Vorthak forces threatening human-protected civilians. You know what that means." The Earth fleet spread out in attack formation and accelerated toward the enemy ships. Human fighters launched from the carrier and swarmed toward the Vorthak vessels like angry hornets. The aliens suddenly found themselves facing not one damaged ship, but an entire battle fleet. The fight that followed was over quickly. Earth's ships used the same tactics Jake had pioneered, emphasizing speed and maneuverability over heavy armor. They struck fast and hard, targeting the Vorthak ship's critical systems before the aliens could respond effectively. Krex Thule watched in disbelief as his superior fleet was systematically destroyed by ships he had considered primitive. Human vessels moved like living things, rolling and weaving through his formations while maintaining devastating firepower. When his flagship took critical damage and began losing atmosphere, the Vorthak commander finally understood what he was facing. These humans did not fight like any species he had encountered. They fought with a combination of technology, tactics, and sheer determination that made them far more dangerous than their numbers suggested. The surviving Vorthak ships fled the system in disorder, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been a proud invasion fleet. Hours later, Jake stood in the asteroid base's main assembly hall, surrounded by 300 grateful civilians from a dozen different species.